huge music fan from anything from the 80s. We'll give you a little bit of a taste. So my name is Nancy McKinney. I've been working in admissions for about 20 years. The majority of it here at UNC, but not all of it. I've been working in Slate for the last 3 years. Before that, I worked with Apply Yourself, which was here at the university. And before that, I worked with the university's homegrown that didn't even have a name. It was just the online application. Just kind of interesting. Just to kind of know who I've got in here, how about let's start with who is already using Slate? Can you raise your hands? So I got everybody that's kind of using Slate. Not too many people brand new to Slate. Has anybody used Slate before, other than here at UNC? Can you raise your hands if you've used it elsewhere? A couple people. So kind of how much experience before here? Are you willing to share?
Well, I guess I just decided to work with Morgan King, so I guess it's UNC.
Okay.
So they adopted it years ago. So
Yes, they were.
When I actually heard that graduate school was transitioning to Slate, I actually had a little party in my office.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I've taken a look at Moorhead Canes because they had requested some help from our office, and I was like, oh my. It's pretty involved. And how about you?
Yeah, before I came here, I was in the University of Graduate College.
Amazing.
And I just mostly was like, could look up students' records if they called and stuff. So I didn't really push them.
Oh, okay. So this is not going to be a how do you work in Slate session, although I'll be glad to ask some questions if you have some burning questions. But basically kind of give you an idea of some of the things that you can do to use Slate to kind of reach out to your students, whether it's just reaching out to them during the regular application process, or if it's as more and more programs are starting to do is reach out for prospecting and using it as a CRM, which Slate is known for being not just an admissions application, but a CRM. Let's see if I can push the right buttons. No. I'm still not getting it. Let's see. I work in IT and I can't get the things to work. It's on here. Back. Help. Oh, now I get it? No. Customer relations management is what CRM usually stands for. The customers can vary quite a bit.
It's just on a mouse click.
On a mouse click? No. That'll work. I can go with that. Okay. So there's our song. We're going to reach out. And in this case, instead of we're going to say Slate's going to be there. So you're going to reach out to your applicants. I mean, hopefully there won't be life filled with confusion when you're working with Slate. So what is Slate? It is a CRM. It's a customer relations management. It's also a tool used for different applications, usually admission applications, but it can be used for scholarship applications. It can be used for fellowship review applications, or it can even be used for sign up for events like orientation. UNC's undergrad orientation will be using Slate next year. We actually kind of did a mock-up program for them this year to take a look at, and they're going to be moving their sign up for orientation into Slate next year. So we're going to talk about more about what Slate is. We're going to talk about how it's reaching out now at UNC. how it can be used to reach out. I'm going to just look at the navigation overview really quickly. We'll talk about some feature highlights, and then we'll finish up with some questions. So just a little, I don't work for Technolutions. I don't work for Slate, but just for a little background, Technolutions is the company. It was founded by Alexander Clark in 1994. In 2000, they introduced Slate. Now here they're calling it Information Management System. But there's your CRM, Customer Relations Management, and it's used to track data about prospective students. And just, it is an interesting company. They are, you can see that there's 800 colleges and universities worldwide. That's grown exponentially in the last few years. They, to this point, have not lost a customer, which is kind of interesting statistic. A lot of the people say the people that are using Slate are usually so excited about it that they drank the Kool-Aid. They're definitely proponents of it. Good morning, fine. So just to give you an indication, the guy that's not with the blue face is Alexander Clark, who's the CEO and founder of the company. For his annual summit this past summer, he had the Blue Man Group perform at the opening session. So he's an interesting character, and I think Slate kind of is representative of that in a way. He tends to always be looking for kind of the new features that work really well that he can kind of bring out and introduce. So if you're working in Slate, it's not unusual to frequently see little changes. Day to day, you can kind of walk in and open it up and see something that looks just a little bit different. So if you are in there working and you're just completely stumped by something that's changed, you feel free to contact us, UNC Slate Support at unc.edu. We'll skip you the admissions team and ITS, and we'll be glad to answer your questions. So how is it reaching out at UNC? Well, there are what we refer to as 3 instances. And I did get Moorhead Kane down here. I didn't know if I'd have somebody down here. There are 3 instances of Slate. ITS has 1. And within our instance, we have 3 databases. The one contains graduate professional schools, Friday Center, summer school certificate, bridges, undergrad and journal transfer, basically whoever is needing to be in Slate that doesn't have any place else falls there. School of Medicine now has their own database under our instance, so the School of Medicine by themselves. And then undergrad admissions started with the CRM portion of Slate, and now they'll start bringing in their first year applicants in Slate. They've already opened up with their part-time studies and readmits. Keenan Flagler Business School has their own instance as well. They actually started just about the exact same time ITS did. We were kind of training and learning it together at the same time. So they're there. And then Moorhead Kane's been around for a while in Slate. How do you know how long exactly they've been in Slate?
I'm not sure. I imagine there's like 4.
I think so.
I think they've had it obviously.
Yeah, they've had it. Yeah, that's been long. So what do we do in Slate? We do admission applications, we do readmits, we do CRM prospecting and recruiting events. And I spoke earlier about orientation. School of Public Health is starting to really dig into the CM portion within Slate. I'm doing recruitment at new events. You can schedule interviews from within Slate. So if you bring in prospective students, and you want to interview them, you can schedule them. You can use that tool a couple different ways, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Scholarship applications, we're starting to get requests to use Slate for folks to do scholarship applications, and it's kind of nice because you can kind of have different workflows through Slate. So you might have an applicant that's coming in through Slate with his admission application. And in the meantime, you want to run them through a scholarship committee. And so you can have workflows in Slate where you follow that application through the different steps of the admission process, but you kind of have a parallel process where you're evaluating them for scholarships. The other thing we have in Slate, which is a little odd, is change of major and minor request. Might not really consider that an application, but for whatever reason, undergrads that are wanting to change their major and minor, they actually start in Connect Carolina. So this is a Connect Carolina user conference, and we're talking about Slate, but Slate's very interrelated with Connect Carolina. But in this case, they make a request in Connect Carolina on their student center. Their requests are pulled into Slate. They come into Slate, do an application, and from there, they get processed for their major or minor request. So some of the things that are used that we're going to kind of talk about are person populations in Slate, deliver in Slate, which is mailings. They refer to them as the deliver aspect. Inbox, interactions and activity codes, inquiry forms, events, and interviews. Those are kind of the things that we're going to specifically be looking at about how you can reach out with Slate. So in Slate, something that I think some people have to get used to is there's what they refer to as person scoped or application scoped. And that can be confusing as far as material, especially when we're dealing with the ITS instance of Slate where there's a lot of there's a lot of different populations. So Slate considers test scores to be person scoped. In other words, those test scores follow that person wherever they are within Slate. So if that person has a application to your program, and to your program, their test scores are going to be available to all three programs because it's tied to the student. Transcripts, schools and transcripts are another thing that are person scope. So you'll see that information potentially for information the student entered on another application, but it becomes available to you because it's a person scope. So that's one thing to kind of keep in mind, and sometimes gets a little confusing for people. We try and keep stuff separated so that you're only seeing your applicant information, but there are some materials that cross over. Deliver mailings. How many people are doing their own mailings? I see a couple of them. It's a pretty powerful tool in Slate. You can just one-off send an email to an applicant, or you can send them to your whole applicant pool, or you can decide which part of it you want to send it to. You can have, you can set up mailings that go out on a schedule. It's pretty powerful. So if you haven't used it, I would, again, we'll talk about a little bit more, but it's something that I would say, seek out some more information about mailing. It's pretty powerful within Slate. Inbox is something that I don't think any of you may have heard about. But when I mentioned that UNC Slate support at unc.edu, is basically on the very top of the, when students log in for an application, they see that link for help to go to that link. Any of those emails come into a Slate inbox now, the feature that Slate has for handling mailings. So when the applicants come in and they have a request, we handle it out of Slate. We communicate it out with Slate back and forth to them. And the one thing that does is that ties that communications trail to that student's application. So you could actually look at your applicants and see that they had communicated earlier. So let's say they said, I had trouble uploading such and such or whatever. And we kind of help them out. And then they come back and say, well, I was kind of late submitting my application for this reason. You'll see a historical trail of why they created it. The other reason I would point out Inbox is because ITS uses it in their instance, but it's also possible for larger admission offices to use Inbox themselves. So let's say, if your whole school, like maybe the School of Public Health or whatever, wanted to start kind of using that as a tool to interact with the students in your program, then you could. And it's kind of nice because it does track it. It allows you to forward emails other places. It allows students to send an attachment, which if you wanted to, you could take from their email and attach it to their application. It's not something that we can offer to, you know, the English department or the biology department. Maybe biology department is pretty big. But it is something, if you're part of a larger admissions office, it's something you might want to take advantage. Interactions and activity codes, again, is something that we'll look at some of these a little more depth as we go forward. So I talked about person populations. Our Slate instance is divided into two different scenarios. The one in the top is what you look at when you look at a record of somebody that's in our read by major population. So the way we keep the English program from seeing an application in computer science is by using this read by major query base, so that you're only given access to your population. So in my test person, you see only his application. You won't see, he may have 3 applications, but you'll only see his. But we also have person by population. So if you're doing recruiting, you're trying to do prospecting, they don't have an application. You can still see them on this record. You still have the dashboard, you still have a timeline, you still have a profile. You can see basic information about the applicant. You could see wherever you communicated with that applicant, but you don't see any applications unless that person subsequently applies to your program. So the 2 majors, we have read by major, which is restricted by major, and the person by population is basically customized. We're just getting into that. And so it may be whoever responds to this inquiry form, we're going to put you in a person population, and only people that have access to that can see this. The other thing that's nice about these permissions by populations is another new feature that we're coming out with is decision release, which was before held by ITS. So programs put in their decisions, recommended, or they're not recommended, they put in decisions, and they would be sent to Connect Carolina. And once they are in Connect Carolina, then actually ITS would review them and release them. And the only reason ITS involved themselves in that was because decision release was open to everybody. So again, if we let the grad school come in and release their decisions, they would also be able to release the School of Medicine's questions. They would be able to release physical therapy's decisions. And so that's why we kept it at ITS. Now we can assign those by populations. So the graduate school has now started releasing their own decisions. And releasing their decisions means the email goes out to the student that says, your decision is here, log in and you can see what it is. So if you do administer your own applications and we haven't come to you yet, say, hey, I want to release my own. I want to determine when I want them to go out. And it also kind of makes a nice, it gives you the ability to kind of stop and check your own decisions before they go out. You're kind of that last stop before it goes out in case you want to double check or just a way to verify what's going on. So earlier when I talked about looking at communications with an applicant to see what has gone on, that's part of this timeline. So you can see the tabs across the top. You see not the very top. Did you see dashboard, timeline, profile, and admin? The timeline tab gives you access to interactions. And when you open that, you can see the various interactions. So this applicant, and it's in chronological order, so the newest ones are on top. But if we look in the green, you see that a message was sent from UNC Gilling. And then you can see that the applicant opened it. it's so faded out you can see, but you can actually see what browser they used, or you can tell if they used an iPhone to open it. It'll usually kind of tell you where they were. It gets a little invasive, but it does give you a lot of information. So when you send emails from Slate, when you use their deliver module, you can track it and see that it went out and that they opened it or not. So if the applicant comes back and says, I didn't get that email, you could say, well, somebody from your account opened it up. Down below, you'll see that in the yellow, you'll see that there was a form. They submitted a form to the TPH fairs. So if you're wanting to use Slate for customer relations management, you can build inquiry forms. And when they submit those forms, they're going to tie to their person record. And you can even track the fact that they clicked a link. So if you, on your form or your email, they had a link that they clicked on, you'll even see that on here. So it's a good way to be able to stay in touch with your applicants and kind of see where they are and what they're doing. So again, using the Deliver program, if you create your own mailings, you also have a lot of statistics you can look at. You can see when people, in all the little squiggly lines at the top, you can see when people opened them, you can see when they clicked them, if an email happened to bounce. Basically what we're down here is we're seeing that was the email itself that went out. You can see in the middle of the page, you can see the available links that were provided in that email. And you can even download reports of here's everybody that, here's who it's gone to, and here's who's opened it. So you can also, when you create your mailings, you can also see how's this going to show on a phone, because so many applicants, students nowadays look at stuff for their phone. So when you create your mailings, you've got a little, so you can switch back and forth. How does this look? How's this going to look to them on the phone? How's it going to look on the computer? So the Deliver tool is pretty powerful. And like I said, we'll be glad to provide you with some other information or support, but I think it's a good thing to explore if you're not using it. This is the inbox that I talked about. So again, it can be used up in the top left corner. It's kind of hard to see, but it does have, Slate has actually had inbox for a while. We weren't using it because there are enough little features that didn't exist in the past, but they've really like, you couldn't forward emails out of inbox in the past. And that was kind of a breaking point for us, is that we have to be able to forward emails, because lots of times we get inquiries that really need to go to the specific admission office. It's not a technical question. So you can forward. Now, it's really become advanced to that we haven't gone there yet, but they actually have bots for the mail. So we can code it and say, this is a typical question that we get. And if it sees wording that tends to match that, it will just automatically send a response to that. Slate came out with that this summer. We haven't quite gotten daring enough yet to do that with our version of Inbox, but we do get a lot of repetitive questions. One of them is when it comes to paying application fees, they get error codes, and a typical error code is they provided the wrong address. And all the time we go, and they go, no, that's my right address. And we just say, well, please just check with your bank. And then they come back and they go, oh, yeah, the bank had a different address. So interactions and activity codes. Again, this is a feature that's been around that hasn't really, I don't think, been used by programs within Slate. And again, I'm the same place again. I'm back to this timeline, and I'm looking at interactions, the same place I saw the email communications, or I saw that they completed a recruitment form. So what you can do is you click on new interaction, and if you click on new interaction, you get a window that looks like what you see up above on the top screen. And it's going to put your name in it, so it's going to track that you are the one that set up this interaction. And then we have a few codes set up there, not a lot, but phone is one of them. And then there's a subcode of phone conversation with the student versus phone conversation with the parent, or whoever. Depends on whether you have helicopter parents or what's the new term I just learned, lawnmower parents. I had heard that one before. They plow ahead of the student and keep stuff clear so the student doesn't have any issues. I thought that was an interesting one. But anyway, it's going to timestamp it, and then the subject is anything you want it to be. That's, the rest of them are codes that you select for, and then you can put your comments in there, and you save it, and then it's going to be recorded here. So that was where somebody filled it up on the top half of that square, and then it would show phone call with student, and it would show your subject line. So you can, applicant calls you on the phone, you can bring them up in Slate, you can do a new interaction and record whatever the conversation you had with them. So it can be a really helpful tool. Like I said, we have a few codes set up. We won't set up 100 new codes, but we'll be willing to take some requests for, some codes that, generic enough that would work across populations. And then the subject line is wide open. So you can always put whatever subject line you want. Yes. Yeah, because you're still looking at what Slate calls the student record, which is kind of, I was like, okay. But you're still getting that timeline regardless. Inquiry forms. Anybody here built an inquiry form? So there are roles in Slate that gives you the ability to have access to different things. Does anybody know what their role is, and does anybody know if they're a coordinator? You are? Yes. Probably, if you have access to Slate right now, you're probably at the coordinator level, and you should have access to inquiry forms. So you can build your own inquiry forms. It's almost kind of drag and drop functionality. The screenshot on the left is a form that's what it looks like that you're building it. And after it's built, that's what the applicant would see. There are what we refer to as system fields. When you build a new form, it populates with some basic system fields that you really need to create a record for that student or to tie it to an existing record. So usually you'll want to keep those fields when you start a new form. A lot of people, one of the questions they ask is the birth date, and a lot of people want to take that off of there. It's like, I'm doing an inquiry form. I don't really want to ask them what their birth date is. The problem is Slate looks at first name, last name, and birth date, or email, but they start with birth date to try and match them with an existing people in the population. So having birth date really kind of helps. You don't have to, but what you find is it might not tie to an existing person. It might not tie on down the line when they do an application. But then you can create whatever questions you want to be. So they were just saying, when do you think you want to come? What are some of your interests or whatever? So, this could be used, and then you have a link on your website, or you provide them in an email, provide them with a link to the form that they can complete. And I didn't give you a screenshot, but I can maybe at the end flip over and show you, because when they fill out the form, not only can you see them on their person, on the student record like we were just looking at, not only would you see the fact that they filled out the form here, but if you looked at the form yourself, it would give you a complete list of who all had submitted the form. And you'd be able to click on each one of them from that. You can look at the group as a whole. And then you can also query and report off of whoever's filled out your form. So inquiry forms. Events. I know nobody in here has done events. Med school started with events right from the very beginning. You won't have access right off the bat. Basically, you do have the access, if you're a coordinator, you do have the access to the inquiry forms. The events, you really need to request access to the CRM, access role in Slate to get to events and interviews that we're going to talk about. But again, if you bring in applicants for a come to UNC, day or whatever it was to give them an idea about it, you can ask them to sign up for it. And so if it depends on how involved it is. If you offer several days, the School of Medicine uses this for their interview days. So when they interview the students that they select to interview, they're sent an email with a link to this event form. And then they'll have the dates scheduled and the calendar will populate with all the available dates. So the students can go through there and click on the date that they want. So it works really well if you have multiple dates. If you only have one date, you can still let them register for it. The other thing you can do is tie, I think I have it. You can tie related events. So let's say you have a day that you bring the students in, and you're wanting them to sign up for a campus tour, or you have some different actual classes that you're going to allow them to sit in on. They could, with using that event form, they could register for which class session they want to come for. Interviews, you could also say, okay, we're going to have interview times at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and 2 o'clock, which time would you want? And they could sign themselves up for an interview, all by logging on to this event form. And even if it's I'm going to be able to make it, we're having an after hours get together for all the prospective students and our new students, let us know that you come. All those things could occur on this event, from this event form. And then that would allow you to track it. It would allow you to communicate back and forth with them. You can have some custom communication set up with it. But those are all related events tied to your initial event of, visit UNC Day. I know no one's using this on campus. We haven't used it, but they do have event check-in and registration. So if you go the whole gamut of doing events, you can do a check-in thing where it confirms that yes, people attended or whatever. Basically, I threw this on here because I'm not entirely sure anybody is going to start using it, but there are so many features within Slate that it's kind of, it's almost kind of, if there's something that you want to do or thinking about doing or some kind of little functionality, Slate probably has it. We may or may not be able to make it available to you, but ask. We may be able to make it happen. And we are, as much as possible, trying to open up more and more functionality to folks across campus. It's just a matter of walking the line of being able to allow you to keep your information to you and not have it out to everybody else on campus. And that's why sometimes we have to kind of lock stuff down tighter than we want to. So those are, I kind of hit on some features that you could use. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. So those I just threw out some features, is basically some features that probably nobody's using but might want to take advantage of. I just thought I'd review real quick. Most of you that have been in here know it, but that's, if you go into applynowunc, wow, how about that? That's not the right URL. Should have another applynowunc.edu. Excuse me, I left out that extra period in there. Or do I have it right? I do have it right. It's on there it's up on the top line. Okay, I'm looking at it from too far away. So main page, when you log in, across where you see slates on the left top, and then you have all the icons. So basically, you've got search, you've got queries and reports on the second one. You've got the reader on the next icon, deliver mailings on the little, looks like a little megaphone. Inbox is the next one, which right now none of you would have access to, but should you be a larger admission office that want to take advantage of it. Forms, events, scheduler, and database. And scheduler is really for interviews. The other thing you can do with interviews is even if you don't have the applicants, through an event, pick an interview time. If you did have interviews for your students when they came and schedule them, you could use it from the back end. You could just schedule them. You could say, okay, I know that Mary, and Joe and Bill are coming for interviews, and you could use the interview portion from here where you could track it and follow up with it. Again, you could still communicate with the applicants as a result of those interviews that you schedule. So you've kind of got two different ways to use interviews. You can allow prospective students to sign up for the interview times that you offer them, or you can just use it to track your own schedule. The majority of the things you're going to do, you're going to be able to just select from those icons. The very last one is the database, and there will be a few things that sometimes you can get into from there, but a lot of times I realize when you click on that, you'll say, no, can't go there. But don't hesitate to explore, because it'll stop you if you can't go there, and you may find some other functionality that you might be interested in using. Like I mentioned in the very beginning, that Alexander's a kind of quirky person, and he's always coming out with new little features and new little changes. And I talked about person populations and read by major and how we kind of restrict things. They're actually in the middle of kind of changing some of that. But in this top right, you see my name, Nancy McKinney Logout, and then you see a search box. So you can use that if you know either a prospect's or applicant's name. You can use that box to search. Or you can use the very first little icon to the right of Slate to search for your applicants. What I'm seeing is Slate pushing us more and more towards using that top right search button, interestingly enough. So if I have to make a criticism of Slate, one of them is they use the same term for a lot of different things. One of them is dashboard. You see the very first tab, and about a third way down the page, that you have dashboard timeline. They use dashboard there for that dashboard tab. But the tab that's actually open in that screenshot is what I refer to as the application tab. So everybody will have a dashboard, a timeline, and a profile tab, but you only have an application tab if you have an application. And if you have multiple applications, you have multiple tabs. So we're looking at an application tab. And all that material, all the information you see right there is called a dashboard. So it's not the same information that you find on the dashboard tab, but it is the information you see at the top of that. A lot of that information is custom. And what you're looking at is actually a grad school dashboard. So we may have different dashboards depending upon the admission office. The graduate school has a little link there for program action and a little link there for program uploads, which may or not appear on your dashboard. That's something, again, that can be, by admission office, we can provide different information. One piece of information that I want to point out is in the bottom left. You see, not the very last thing, but right above person uploads, you see North Carolina residency, RES, and expire date. Everybody familiar with the new RDS system? It works pretty well, actually. There's still some little bitty things to figure out, but it's working pretty well. As applications open up, starting with August 1st, as applications open for the new admission cycle, they are required to use the RDS system, and they're accessing it through Slate. Each applicant is required to, if they say they're a resident, they have to, they're given instructions how to go out to the RDS system, and they have to come back in and put their RCN number in the application in order to submit. So we are putting the results there. We're putting the residency result and the expiration date if they are a resident. So that, like I said, that information is custom on there, but it is, a lot of the information that's on there is really important, especially when you get into like decision release, when if you're taking on your own decision release. This is telling you that, okay, here's their stat. You see PS action reason. That's their status in PeopleSoft, Connect Carolina. So that becomes important to know because we try to keep things in sync. PDF download, I wanted to do that. Please tell me that nobody's going to raise their hand that they download PDFs. Yeah, I know. Okay, thank you for being brave enough to raise your hand after I kind of said I didn't want to see it. So yeah, we don't encourage it. The reader in Slate is pretty robust and makes a good way to review the applications, but I realize it, there's sometimes it doesn't meet all the needs, or there are just people that can't give up their PDF. On the screenshot on the left, that's where you download a PDF from the menu. Used to, when you went there, what you would see would probably look a lot like what's at the top half of the second screenshot. It no longer looks that way. I don't know if anybody's looked there or not. You now only have, I think, two choices for what to download in your PDF. And that is basically everything, every question question they answered, and everything they uploaded, including letters of recommendation. So that's one option. And the other option is just the questions they answered within the application, none of the uploads. The reason we didn't do that to be restrictive, the reason we did it is because applicants have the ability to download a proof of their application once they submit. It's on their status page. And we got inquiry after inquiry. I don't know if the help desk got those requests, but they said, I uploaded a personal statement and it's not in my proof. Or I uploaded this and I uploaded my statement of purpose. I can't see it in this. And it did not include uploads. And the only way to provide that to applicants in their proof was to set up very specific PDF downloads. And so that's why you got it. Now, if you do need to download PDFs and what you're getting doesn't meet your needs, please put in a request to UNC Slate Support at unc.edu, and we will look at coming up with some additional potential versions. Like I said, right now you get basically the bare minimum, or you get the whole thing. Reader has some new features. If you haven't looked in there in a while, I would take another look at it. It's got some pop-out tabs, which allows you to kind of have one application and open it up and look at other applications or other review things. So like I said, it's just another feature that I'd encourage you to look at and know that you could look at for your evaluators. There is a Slate app. I downloaded it a long time ago. I haven't really looked at it in a while, but there is a Slate app where your evaluators could look at their evaluations, while they're on the road or whatever. They don't have a computer and they want to look at them on their phone. Again, something you can explore. There's also new functionality with recommenders. We haven't configured it yet, but I'm sure it'll be coming pretty soon. And one is it's a very standardized communication that goes out to the recommenders saying, so-and-so's requested a recommendation. It does tell them what program and plan, I'm pretty sure, is requesting that, because that was early on a request we got to add that to that communication. Now, or like I said, it's not available yet, but I would expect to see it sometime soon, is the ability for the applicant to put a personal message to their recommender. So when that recommender goes, opens up to submit the recommendation, they can see something specific from the applicant and not just the set standard verbiage that they get from every single request. And that's kind of it. That's kind of, here's some features you might want to take a look at, how you can use it maybe more as a prospecting customer relationship tool. And do you have any questions?
Question about the interaction activity codes. Are those ever, can students ever see those, or are they always?
No.
Okay, they're always.
Yep, they are internal. Right now, reader evaluators, which are usually what your faculty are, could not do that. There's a sticky note function within the reader that they can put comments, or there's some other ways, but right now they don't have the possibility to do an interaction. What you may want to look at is a request for a review form that just allows them to enter notes as part of their evaluation or whatever. And that's something that, yeah.
So you download the PDF, those reviews, those be printed, is that part of the video?
I'm not sure.
In the past, I haven't seen that.
I don't think it is. I do not think those review forms are part of it yet. I'm not even sure if I can make them part of it, but I can.
And then it'll be pulled into a report.
Yes, it can. Yes. Anything on those, anything on the review form can be part of a report and information queried out.
The inquiry forms and event forms, can those be embedded onto like the website?
The inquiry form can be, and the event form, I think the event form, but the inquiry form can definitely be done. And inquiry forms, like I said, if you're a coordinator right now, you can do an inquiry form. And you can actually do, I'll see if I can get there. Can I get but there is one of my screenshots. Now I've lost it now. There's in the top left-hand corner of when you're in Slate, in the top left-hand corner, there's a light bulb. I don't know if you've ever seen it, because it can kind of look it can kind of look small or faded out a little bit. There's a little light bulb. If you click on that light bulb, it brings up a health document or instructional documents, whatever. So, and there's a decent document that Slate puts out on inquiry forms. So if you're really interested, the only thing we'd ask with inquiry forms is that definitely when you do your first one, and even with subsequent ones, would like to review it, not just to police it, but because there's different ways to create forms, and just so that some of it is so you don't run into any problems with it. It's just kind of like, go ahead and build it, play with it or whatever, but before you release it, just shoot a message to UNC Slate support and say, hey, I'd like to start using this new inquiry form. Thank you. Usually I find out that I work with people, I've been able to give them something to make it better. That's kind of my focus. It's like, what can I help, with it that I know that might, work for it. But other times there are things that you might be stepping on. Like we usually say, other than the system fields that come on the page, please don't use system fields, because what you could be doing is bringing in information that would overwrite application. So just to kind of review, and especially like I said with that first one, get you going. We say, hey, play with it, build it before you release it. Let's just talk about it. Anything else? Well, hopefully they gave you some things to think about, and hopefully it was helpful. Have a good rest of your day.